On problems 1 and 2, the instructions say to sketch a relative frequency histogram for each distribution of sample data and determine if it is a normal or non-normal distribution. So just for some reading, the instructions are sketch a relative frequency histogram and determine if it's normal or non-normal. Those are the two main important parts of these instructions. So now let's try to read for number 1. I'm going to do number 1, and then you'll do number 2 on your own. So for number 1, we've got some data with time studied for a math exam in hours. And then this is the relative frequency. So you'll remember from Math 1 that relative frequency is like percentages. 0.20, remember percentage, you move the decimal twice, so that's like 20%. So 20% of this sample data, 20% of the students studied 0 to 1.5 hours for this exam. 35% studied 1.5 to 3 hours. 25% studied 3 to 4.5 hours. 15% studied 4.5 to 6 hours, and 5% studied between 6 and 7.5 hours, right? And technically, that doesn't include this last number. So technically, it's like 20% studied less than 1.5 hours, right? And then technically 35% studied from 1.5 hours on up to almost 3, but just less than 3 hours. So just those are some review parts from Math 1. So now when we're going to make a frequency histogram, whenever I'm going to make a graph, I like to use graph paper to help me with that. So I'm going to get this graph paper. And I need to make 2 axes. On my x-axis, I need to make enough room to graph these bins. So since they're going by 1.5 markers, I might as well, I could count by ones. We always start at 0 here, and then I could count by 1 every 2 spaces. So that way I can see the halves. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that would get me up to 7.5. So on this axis, I have time studied for math exam in hours, right? And then on this axis, I have the relative frequency. So that's basically saying, again, kind of a percent of respondents. So I need to get up to 0.35. So let's see, if I just do, again, I could probably count by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4. That would get me up that far. So now we need to make the bins. From 0 to 1.5, the bin is at 20%. So I make this bar up to there. From 1.5 to 3, this bin is 3.35, or 0.35, so 35%. Okay, from 3 to 4.5, right here. From 4.5 to 6, 15%, right? 0.15. And then from 6 to 7.5 is just 0.5 or 5%. Okay, and then that's the first part of the instruction. So you feel like, okay, I'm finished now, right? I made a relative frequency histogram. But don't forget there's a second part of the instruction to determine if it's normal or non-normal. So this data it's got a little bit of that U shape, but the problem is it also has a little bit of a tail. So I would say that for me, I would say this is skewing right towards that tail, right? So to me, I would say that's not normal because it's a little bit skewed. So, but if you were to say, yeah, it's normal because it's not that skewed, and it still has a pretty relative U shape. So the big thing is being able to justify your answer. Well, this is mostly U-shaped and only a little bit of a tail, so it's approximately normal. My answer, I'm saying it's not normal because it's skewing a little bit, to the right.